We'll do what's turned into, I guess, our weekly warm-up. I invite you to close your eyes along with me if that's comfortable for you. We nothing fancy here, but we will just take a few moments, starting right now, to just take note of the breaths we are receiving at your own pace, no judgment. And let's intend for this little exercise to bring us into the present moment, the moment we start focusing on breath. That might help with that project very much. Another way to think about it is becoming more present of our physical body, more conscious of it, more present with it, brings us into the present moment, oftentimes. And we might take a moment to think about the source of the breath that we're receiving. That certainly connects me to the whole reason we're here, which is to look at the challenges of our everyday lives, our issues, all the words we have for them, from the perspective of the being part of the human being that we are. So tonight's warm-up, part 2, is just a short story. I don't think it'll take terribly long, but it really was a fun moment for me today as a spiritual workout guy, or whenever that was, today, yesterday. And I was just doing a session with somebody who, by nature, is just not one of those people who's overly, terribly, let's just say, emotionally expressive. Super nice person, super talented, nothing wrong with this person whatsoever. He just happens to have a style whereby being hyper conscious of emotion is just not part of his everyday makeup. He has reported to me that, there are moments where he gets a little emotional. He can usually see them coming. They're usually in the same realm. And that's it. No problem. We weren't even talking about that. But we wound up doing a reasonably thick, is that a good word? Tapping session. When I say thick, I just mean there were many, many things to touch upon in the tapping session. It was one of those that for me was very broad in terms of content. Like we weren't just tapping on a specific belief, right? And I know you guys know what I'm talking about. And it went on for some time. It wasn't just 2 or 3 minutes. It was more like 10, 12, 14 minutes in that range of just talking and tapping, talking and tapping, talking and tapping, talking about a whole bunch of things that he's probably not used to talking about. He's definitely not used to tapping. And the concept that really came up in a conversation we had subsequent to that is all about mind and, well, it's lots of things, but it's about how mind and body are connected. And mind and body are connected as a concept, for me, is one of those that I'm sure scientists and biologists could, and they do, go on and on and on and on and on and on about all of how that's the case and why it's the case and what happens. And that's all fantastic information. It's just never information that I care a whole lot about. I love to just see how these ideas show up in our everyday lives. So when he contacted me, it must have been a day or so after the tapping, within 24 hours. And he said, he just asked, is it normal to get very emotional after a tapping session? And of course, I talked to him, we connected right there. Not of course, but that's what was able to happen. And I just wanted to make sure that the tapping session hadn't sent him off into some deeply unmanageable, emotional, overwhelmed situation. And that was absolutely not the case. So once we got out of the way, I asked him, of course, to just tell me a little bit more of what's been going on. He said, well, I don't know. I mean, the tapping was good and it felt good. And then I was, it was a couple hours later and something was on the news and it was one of those uplifting personal interest stories. He was just quasi tending to it, not really, sort of a little bit in the background, a little bit paying attention. And he got all emotional. For me, that would be no big deal. I would actually welcome it. And again, once I realized that he had not wound up in some danger zone, I was very encouraging of it for him. But he was really taken aback, basically saying, I'm not an emotional person. We didn't do anything in the tapping session specifically that was addressing that issue at all. So why is it that I would be all emotional, quote unquote, after doing that tapping with you? And, we can use a lot of concepts to help explain this. Of course, everything is energy is one of them. But for me, it's that mind-body connection. So we're talking about what we're aware of in our conscious minds, in our heads, essentially, and then being the tip of the iceberg. What is that? 5, 7, 8%, right? And then the subconscious, everything else is, basically our bodies. So the mind and body connection, to me, is what really made itself known in this particular situation. In other words, all of that emotion has been living in his body all this time. He's not a non-emotional person. We're all emotional people. We're emotional beings. It's one of the things that makes us human, is our ability to experience emotion on a very wide spectrum. So what it all looked like to me was the emotion that was living in his body all along just got freed up a little bit. And the connection between what he was saying and thinking in his conscious mind and the shifting of the energy released enough so that some of that emotion just broke free. It's always there. It's in the iceberg, not at the tip, but it's in the iceberg. And so it's in the body. The tapping, for most of us, most of the time, we are using our mind to decide what it is we're even going to talk about while we're tapping. Again, that's how it is for most of us. And so the combination of how the mind works and how the body works and how they work together, and there are infinite ways that happens, and this is just one. But I thought it was really interesting for him to see that connection. He's like, we were even not talking about things that were emotional. We weren't talking about things that had to do with whatever was on the TV. So he was not fully understanding how that could necessarily be the case. I, as a spiritual workout guy, I'm like, well, everything's energy anyway. It's always moving around. If it gets stagnant and we move it around, then step back, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You know that the energy is shifted. You know it's going to resettle somewhere, somehow. You just don't always know how. And then once it does, you can make decisions about what to do about it. But mind and body are connected. This is one particular way that I, anyway, got to see that. I wanted to share that with you. Now that I have, I invite you to take a nice deep breath with me and hold on to the good stuff. Let go of the bad stuff. If there is any. And just come on back whenever you're ready.